I'm Naisha McCauley, and you're watching accesstv.org.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Sharon Harden. This poem was written by Langston Hughes, which was born in 1902 and died in 1967. The poem is called Remember. Remember the days of bondage and remembering. Do not stand still. Go to the highest hill and look down upon the hills. Look down upon the town where you yet as a slave. Look down upon any town in the Carolinas, or any town in Maine, or any town for that matter, or Africa, or your homeland. And you will see what I mean as you see what it means to be a white hand, a thief, a white face, a lying face, and the white power. The unspoken power, and that makes you the hungry wretch that you are today. And that is by Langston Hughes. And thank you so very much.
On behalf of the Historical Society, thank you very much for inviting us. This is a historic occasion. Connecticut is a state that for a long time never wanted to admit that there were slaves in Connecticut. And this is a wonderful step forward in acknowledging that past, even though it's not the most pleasant past that we can document. We're just very, very happy that I was able to be here for this very important event. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
It's really great to be here this afternoon with all of you, and I want to say that this is a very important and auspicious occasion. You know, from the time that I've been, for the past 40 years that I've been in New Haven, the whole question of slavery and Connecticut has been one that has been brought to my attention and to my actual political and public life. And it started with the Amistad event, and Al Martyr, who is here. Could everybody just give Al a hand? Brought to my attention the struggle of the Singbe PA and those who took over the Amistad schooner and brought it into New Haven Harbor. And our history has been one of people coming together to recognize the innate freedom in every human being. And if you think about the Amistad case, and how it actually began to unravel the vestiges of African slavery here in the United States of America. And it was because of those people who came together to do that. And we have the statue downstairs. That was one of my first jobs on the Board of Aldermen, to cite it. But what's really special about that statue, it was put together by all of the children in New Haven public schools, brought their dimes, their nickels, their dollars, because they recognized at that particular time how important that story is to the story of slavery here in our state as well as here in our country. You know, this year marks the 150th anniversary of the Emancipation Proclamation. And we celebrated that earlier this year up at the state capitol. It was a wonderful celebration. And we knew as we celebrated it that in emancipating the slaves 150 years ago, there were many reasons, some of which were political reasons for doing it. But just like the Amistad case, it was the next huge step in assuring that a people who were brought here to work against their will, free labor, actually were beginning to get free. And we fought a long, hard war to assure that everyone was free. I want to thank Phyllis Silverman, stand up Phyllis, for working with Stella Antley on this issue. And you know, oftentimes people forget that Connecticut was a slave state. The General Assembly of Connecticut, in a bipartisan fashion, apologized for slavery. And this is very important to Stella Antley because she is the great-great-granddaughter of someone who was a slave. And so I want to present to her this official apology, and I will read it. It's kind of long, and it was introduced by the entire General Assembly. It was offered actually in the House by Representative Green from the 1st District. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Connecticut General Assembly issues its apology for the practices of slavery in Connecticut and expresses its profound contrition for the official acts that sanctioned and perpetuated denial of basic human rights and dignity to fellow humans, and vows to work for the elimination of residual structures of racism that continue to exist in our state, and
be it further resolved that the General Assembly urges schools, colleges, universities, religious and civic institutions, businesses, and professional associations to do all within their respective powers to acknowledge the transgressions of Connecticut's journey from a colony to a leading state in the abolition efforts, and to learn the lessons of history in order to avoid repeating mistakes of the past and to promote racial equality and reconciliation. And
be it further resolved that the Connecticut Assembly calls on all Connecticut residents to recommit their state, their communities, and themselves to the proclamation of their nation's Declaration of Independence, and that all persons are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, and to work daily to treat all persons with abiding respect for their humanity, and to eliminate racial prejudices, injustices, and discriminations from our society. General Assembly, January session 2009, and it's our LCO number 6447, offered by Representative Green, standing to my right, and Representative Cafaro of the 142nd District. It is with great pride that I am honored to present this to Stella Antley. Thank you for assuring that the very important work that was done by the General Assembly did not go unnoticed or forgotten. Thank you very much.
Connecticut and the northern states for a long time throughout history would like to believe that we did not indulge in the enslavement of people. I refuse to call people slaves. I acknowledge that the history in this country is that they enslaved people because Africans came here as people, not as slaves. So I don't call them slaves. Enslavement of African peoples. Connecticut at one point had the largest number of enslavement of Africans in the New England area. So we have a long history where we've been involved. The state of Connecticut, through the reading of that resolution, you saw through the General Assembly and through the policies of the state that we condoned it. Our businesses condoned it, and when we looked at the Hartford Courant and the Hartford Courant using its advertising space to either advertise for the capture of runaway enslaved African peoples, we know that our insurance companies wrote policies to businesses that insure Africans. So there were a lot of complicity in the involvement of our businesses, in the state, in the enslavement of people all over this country. And Connecticut had a role in that. And we know the role that the Amistad situation played here in New Haven and in New England. So with the support of Senator Harp and the Black and Puerto Rican Caucus and the African American Affairs Committees and a number of our legislators, we were able to do this because Connecticut had to say that yes, we had a role. And when you begin to apologize, the idea is that you move on and you acknowledge that. And not only with Stella, but most of us who may be descendants of Africans who were enslaved, we really continue to struggle and to work for that all of us can recognize that part of our history so that we may continue to grow. And on the 50th anniversary of the March on Washington, on the 150th anniversary of the emancipation, which I have some issues with, but throughout its history of this country with people of color, we have to continue to move forward to acknowledge and recognize all of us as people and as one human being and one race. Thank you.
It is an honor to introduce Stella Antley, the great-granddaughter of the slave who was just mentioned. Stella is a long-time fighter for all things right from grassroots organization, where she began her career in human resources human services such as the Urban League Street Academy for GED, CRT, community advocacy for education, counselor with the late John Warlow of the Housing Authority, Hartford Housing Authority. Continuing her work in politics, Stella started out poll standing, registered people to vote, did lots of door-to-door canvassing, and she worked on many political campaigns for governor, state treasurer, various legislators. The late civil rights advocate and state representative Boyd Hines was one of her mentors, and the late Senator Wilbur Smith, who established the first federally recognized enterprise zone in the north end of Hartford. And finally, under the late Governor Bill O'Neill, she worked for the Connecticut Secretary of State and was a patronage employee at the state capitol for over 15 years. She went on to earn her Associate's and Bachelor's of Science in Human Services. Stella is a proud mother, 3 children and grandchildren. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, Stella Antley.
The slave's been dead for many years, and I'm sure if she were alive today, she would want me to accept this in humble dignity. I do believe. Slavery is a horrible atrocity for anyone to have to live through. But she lived through it and she came out. I did get to know her. When she died, I was about 9 years old. She loved to go barefoot. She loved to dip snuff. She spoke in parables, although she could not read. She knew the Bible. And she was always running away from home. And I remember my mother and grandmother having me and my brother go back and get her and bring her back home. She was the first midwife in this fledgling town that was not even founded yet in the 1800s when she walked there after being freed from Charleston, South Carolina. In her eulogy, which I didn't have a copy of to put up for you, but it is said in her eulogy that she delivered all the first citizens of this fledgling town, both white and black. In the dead of night when most babies come, she was walking through woods, this main street now, to deliver these babies, black and white. She actually cared for her masters. I remember one story passed down to me, and I digress, but when she did the babies, at this time, there's nothing in the town to mark her existence, and that's something I have been on a sojourning to make sure, and this piece of legislation is going to open up many venues for me to pursue this. But they don't have a building or a street or a tree. Of course, during her lifetime as a slave, they were not recognizing black people that way, but it's my onus. I believe I was born for this moment. She lived to be 111 and enter into generation, dying in 1957. So I have the onus of making sure that her life is not just forgotten. If you look at, I call this country now the tale of two cities. Because if you look in the South, where blacks have their black colleges and institutions, they're thriving, they're working, beautiful homes. There's some poverty there too, but up north we have no black institutions. We are always a part of someone else's parade. We don't even have a Black American parade anymore. So I'm just asking people to go back to your communities. I would like to see a million boy march, because our youth, they're being lost. The black on black crime, I'm sorry about Trayvon Martin, I clearly am. But I think if the slave were alive today and I told her that a black boy got shot last night, she would assume that it was by a white man, by a KKK. And if I told her no, it was a black, she wouldn't be able to wrap her mind around it. That someone black was killing someone black, and that's happening much more frequently every night. So I think the slave would want me to take my 15 minutes of fame, to take her lineage. She's passed, she's gone, there's nothing we can do about that. But moving forward, we have to save our youth, our black children. I think we need to bring corporal punishment back to the families of these children, because now the inmates are running the asylum. You can't hit your child, but someone can shoot him in the back. Corporal punishment, we all grew up with being spanked. I don't think it's going to hurt anybody. This proclamation is just a beginning. If Martin Luther King were alive today, I think he would be proud that we have an apology. And this on the heels of the March on Washington. I think it's a great combination. So having said that, I have a lot of notes that I've written. I asked the Lord, I asked Jah, Allah, Jesus, everybody to give me the right words. Not to sound bitter, but I have to be, and not to placate, but I have to be honest that I think we've come a long way, but we still have a very long way to go. And we're going to only get there if we realize that we're all in the same boat. We're all bone, marrow, and blood. No one is better than the other. This woman holding me as a baby, we can't imagine what it was like in the 60s. Can you imagine what it was like to be a slave? She had to live the atrocities that this woman had to endure. But still, I have this story where she used to go out during the Civil War and feed her masters. She did it by going out with food in her apron and throwing it slop to the pigs, and he would crawl out with them, and she fed him. So we need to get over being bitter and full of hatred and just try to help one another. I've always been into civil rights. I've always been in human services. I've always tried to pass it on and to help people, regardless of their race. And I'm just asking if people could do that, we'd be so much better off.